Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Interesting People of Earth, a digital campfire for meaningful dialogue about life, purpose, and all the things that make us human. Today, we have a really awesome guest joining us, someone whose story deeply resonates with me and with many of us navigating identity, culture, and belonging in an increasingly globalized world. Born in Congo to Lebanese and Egyptian parents, Rana has lived across Kinshasa, Beirut, and now the Netherlands, carrying with her stories, languages, and complexities of multiple worlds. Her journey is one of decolonization, reconnection, and radical self acceptance through food, dance, ancestry, and body wisdom. I met Rana a few weeks ago at a workshop in Rotterdam, and I was struck by how she speaks about belonging, not as assimilation, but as returning to the self. I knew right away that I wanted to continue that conversation here. Rana, welcome to Interesting People of Earth.
Thank
How are you
you.
feeling today?
I'm really good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming onto the show. I just randomly DM'd Rana. I was like, we had a great conversation. I would love for you to come on the podcast. I think today there's all the materials to have a really good conversation and have a conversation that I think a lot of people maybe they don't realize, but a lot of people are having, but in their own little pockets. We were just mentioning about how I'm from the African diaspora, you're from the Middle Eastern diaspora, if that's even the right terminology, but we have so many similarities that we don't make space to kind of discover that. So I hope today we can have that conversation better. So yeah, I'll start with first question. You've lived across Congo, Lebanon, and now the Netherlands, three incredibly distinct cultures. When you think back to your childhood in Kinshasa, what do you remember most vividly about how you first understood who you were?
So if I look back at my childhood in Congo, the number one thing that comes to my mind is how diverse it is.
Okay.
So I remember going to school with Congolese kids, Lebanese kids. I think there was even like a Korean girl with us, Spanish, like people are really from all over the world. And because as a child I was exposed to that environment, it really normalized it for me at a very young age.
Okay.
So actually later on when we moved to Lebanon, for example, and where people were more similar, it was a shock for me. Like, where's
the culture? Where's the mix?
Yes. And I think that's why, like, I ended up moving to the Netherlands, trying to find back that diversity in culture. And it made basically living in these gigantic cities, metropolitan areas where it's a melting pot of different culture very normal for me.
Yeah.
But it also did, growing up in Congo, it did shape a bit my notion of home, meaning that I knew it wasn't my country, but I still loved it.
Yeah.
And I was used to it. But then Lebanon was also not entirely my home and not Egypt. So there was this thing where I could sense, even as a child, that it's like I have multiple references
to what home means.
And I could understand that not everybody necessarily had that.
Yeah. I can definitely relate to that. I think a lot of people that are third culture kids that, yeah, you grew up in different cultures that are so different from your original culture. And as much as, like you said, you love where you're raised, where your upbringing is. I'm sure there's an element of Congolese culture that'll always be a part of you.
Yeah.
But you get to choose, you know? You're not 100% Congolese. You have all these other cultures that are very specific to you because of the mix. But yeah, when you're younger, you can definitely feel like, okay, like who am I really actually, you know?
Exactly. And you create a mixed definition that like I'm this half Lebanese, half Egyptian kid who eats Congolese food, like wants pondu and matembele and goes to Egyptian beaches in the summer. And that's who I am.
Yeah.
So you get to, it also creates some freedom because
Yeah.
you're not tied to one culture. So
Exactly.
then that also allows you to look at every culture with a bit of critical thinking, like, I'm not sure about this, but yes, I will adopt this value that you
Yeah.
have. So you get to, you get more freedom to define yourself.
Yeah, you get to pick and choose. I think what you said about being able to kind of step outside of a culture and see, okay, maybe this isn't, I think that on its own gives you a level of awareness from a really young age that people only if they move or if they something drastic happens to them that's
Yes.
different from the people in their lives, that you only get that you're forced to get that level of awareness if
Yes.
something happens, but you innately get that from having an understanding that cultures are constructed. Like people are picking these things
Exactly.
to like all agree with, and there's
Yeah.
you see that you have different distinct cultures where you're like, oh, okay, we're all just picking and choosing. Okay, I can just pick from what I like and what makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you've described learning this or figuring out pretty early on this idea that cultures are different and that you get to choose what resonates more with you, and that home was a very fluid concept from a young age and constantly having to adapt to fit into different worlds. When did you realize that this adaptability, which once helped you survive, growing up and being able to code switch so easily, might have kind of distanced you from certain parts of yourself? Or did that happen?
It definitely did, because learning to code switch is a good skill, but then you can do it too much. So you can become too adaptable, which
Yeah.
can then lead into more people pleasing.
Yeah.
So it's like I got a sense, like, for example, when I would go to Egypt, I would know that my dad's family might not understand the Lebanese Arabic I'm speaking. So I need to say certain words in Egyptian dialect. But then that flexibility can be helpful, but then
Yeah.
I developed at some point a very good sense of understanding what people expect of me and then always adapting to that.
Yeah.
So then when I moved to the Netherlands, for example, there was, and I think anyone who has experienced Dutch culture knows how there's a saying here of "doe normaal," which is like be normal, basically. Which there's a collection of things that Dutch people assume to be normal,
Yeah.
and then they expect everyone to just adhere to that
that
version of normal.
Yeah.
So my first few years here, I definitely was really trying to fit and trying to be perceived by Dutch people. I was very conscious of how I was being perceived and wanting to match their normal, just like I wanted to match my Egyptian family's normal, my Lebanese family's normal, my Congolese friends normal.
Yeah.
So you can do it too much,
Yeah.
to the point where you can lose yourself in the process. And that's definitely what happened to me in the Netherlands.
I can definitely imagine that. I think that, part of the superpower that you gained from moving around so much and having different identities that you can pick from and different identities that you can switch into, it does make you really good at being a chameleon. But I also had to learn this too for myself in my mid-20s, that being a chameleon is good, but if you don't have a strong sense of who you are first, then you end up kind of just being whomever people want you to be. And when you don't have that very clear sense of internal home, not just physical home, then it's very easy to lose yourself in the process and lose what actually makes you really special, which is the mix, not picking one over the other.
Exactly.
And so going back to this idea of belonging everywhere but nowhere at the same time, which I know a lot of third culture kids and people that have grown up moving around a lot, or just from multicultural identities where like their parents are from different cultures. what did belonging mean to you growing up? Or was that something that you even thought about or that was of note for you? Like were there many moments where you felt like you really struggled to fit in? And since then, if that was the case, what has the definition evolved into for you today?
I feel like for most of, especially in my teenage years, I struggled a lot with the notion of belonging. I do remember feeling that I don't belong. By that time, we had moved to Lebanon, so I was living in Beirut, and everyone around me was just purely Lebanese.
Yeah.
I actually remember wanting to hide the fact that my dad is Egyptian. So it was really, I really felt the pressure to belong in a certain way. But I think at a certain point, it just switched. It's like you get to a certain point where you realize that you will never belong 100% anywhere. And then that kind of becomes your key to freedom, you know? Like, therefore, I'm not even gonna try to belong. And then I'm actually gonna go the extra mile of figuring out what are the places where I belong. And what I found out now is that, yes, it's not in one place.
Yeah.
It's more that different communities, different identities, different places mirror a different side of me.
Exactly.
And I can belong to all of them at the
Yeah.
same time. And maybe sometimes I feel more belonging to one part over the other, depending on what I'm going through in life. But I really enjoy like this ability to belong in a lot of different spaces. That also means that I can relate to a lot of different people.
Yeah.
And that has also brought a lot of different people from different backgrounds, different walks of life into my life. And that's probably what I'm grateful for the most out of this whole experience.
I definitely agree with that, that once you figure out that you don't have to lose yourself in belonging in a very specific identity, because, you know, like you said, when you were living in Lebanon, they belong because that's the only option, actually, you know? And when you have multiple options of belonging, it's a matter of you choosing, but it doesn't feel that way when you're younger. It feels like you're looking at everyone and you're like, oh, they just naturally slot in somewhere. And I don't naturally slot in somewhere. But as you get older, you realize, yeah, same here. I'm able to talk to anyone.
Yeah.
To really connect with them at a human to human level, because that's where you learn when you meet so many people from different parts of the world and they have different identities, you just realize that at the end of the day, people are people everywhere.
Yeah.
And it changes the texture and the quality of the types of relationships that you can have with people. But you do have to get to a place where you're happy with all the multiple sides of you. Like you said, different people bring out different sides of you. Like if I meet a Senegalese person, that is a almost dormant side of me, but it's real. And it's, you know, from a place where I lived in Senegal for many years, I have a love for the culture, but not everyone can activate that part of me. And yeah, I think it makes people interesting. It makes you fascinating. I'm sure people meet you and they're like, oh my gosh, you have such a breadth of life experience for so young, you know? So it's definitely something that you, as you get older, start to see the value and the privilege in. So let's talk about you moving to the Netherlands. So what prompted the move to the Netherlands? Was it work? Was it for school? Was it just to be in a big city and to be in a multicultural space? Like what prompted that?
I ask myself this question too.
Every day.
So it was a lot of different reasons.
Okay.
So mainly it was the So I was in Lebanon, and I had the option to start my studies there.
Okay.
And at a certain point, I really wanted to experience like the big university, like at the forefront of my field. I was studying architecture back then, and then Rotterdam, like anyone in the architecture world knows that Rotterdam is the place to be. So I had this dream of like studying in TU Delft, and then like number 2 best university in the, like when you're a kid in Lebanon, like these things matter. Like so yeah, I wanted to have that experience, but I think subconsciously I also wanted to experience a bit more diversity and openness. So more multicultural places. And I think I definitely had the perception that the Netherlands was a lot more I had the image that it was a bit more like, maybe, I don't know if the US is a good example, but like and more integrated, like with different communities that are really integrated, where like where you come from doesn't matter, and like it's open acceptance for everyone. And I think I was really craving that. And I really wanted to flip the page. I also felt that Lebanon was I always saw Lebanon, I loved living there, but I always knew that politically it would always end up like as a ticking bomb. And now with the situation, I really see that I did make the right decision in leaving, because I wouldn't want to be experiencing that. So it was a lot of reasons, but I ended up in Delft at 21.
Okay. So let's talk about that. So you said, you moved to the Netherlands. You moved to the Netherlands at 21. You expected a multicultural and tolerant society that was open-minded and integrated. But you found something, I assume, different from that.
Yeah.
What did you find, actually?
So a big thing is there's a huge difference between tolerance and acceptance. And the Dutch are tolerant, very tolerant, meaning that you do you, but away from me. That is that is kind of the assumption. Like, I don't care what you do as long as it doesn't affect me. As long as I don't need to adjust anything in the way that I do stuff to accommodate you. And the moment you need, or you require, or you feel entitled to a certain level of accommodation, that's when you will see a lot of resistance. So that is on one end, finding out that, Dutch culture, and of course it differs in big cities, but I was in Delft. So I found a society that is also quite close-minded in some sense. But very open-minded in others. So there's a lot of freedom about your identity, how you want to present, your sexuality, who you want to surround yourself with. All of this, you have absolute ultimate freedom. But then when it comes to certain things, it's still, I can see that it's still quite close-minded. So yeah, it was interesting to have a first, like, how do you say, like maybe disappointment. But I think it was also needed, because from there, I was really able to question how I want to show up, regardless of how I am being perceived. And that was a big turning point, because in Congo, I was white. I went to Lebanon, I was that girl with curly hair. Like, why is her hair curly? Like I was more African than the rest of them, and they can see it. So I was more African. Like, And then I moved to the Netherlands, and here I am, basically almost black, you know? And it's like
Yeah.
that change on the spectrum,
Yeah.
depending on who the observer is, made me realize that, oh, okay, like you have absolute no control about
Yeah.
how you are being perceived.
Yeah.
So it started leading me in the direction where I was showing up more authentically because I started not caring
Yeah.
about people's perception of me.
And also how little control you have over that. I mean,
Exactly.
I've noticed this in a different way of being someone that I came from the United States. I'm a dark-skinned Black woman, and there's a perception of where you are categorized in terms of hierarchy, you know?
Yeah.
But then I come to the Netherlands, and because I have an American accent, it changes my hierarchy, which should not exist. But yeah, like you said, you have such little control over how people perceive you, what that context demands of you, that just do you. And
Yes.
I do see what you mean of like, it gave me the freedom to be me actually at this point, because it's clear that no matter where I go, someone's going to tell me who they think I am.
Exactly.
Okay, so like you mentioned, the Dutch pride themselves in tolerance, but often confuse it with acceptance. How did you navigate it? I know you mentioned a bit about how it gave you the space to now realize, okay, like I can choose who I am and all that stuff, but that feels like a very light and fluffy summary of it. Like, how did you really go about reclaiming who you are when you got disappointed, like when this experience turned out to be a disappointing one?
You're right. It was not a light and fluffy journey whatsoever.
Yeah.
It was dark and it was difficult. And to be honest, first I had to go through the crisis and the absolute sadness of realizing that what I thought would be my breakthrough into a home was not that.
Yeah.
And it was yet again another grieving process.
Yeah.
I also had to understand how much I had idealized Western societies in my mind. That is also the result of growing up in two colonized countries. So Congo colonized by Belgium. I went to Belgian school. Was taught about all the kings and queens of Belgium, never about what they did in Congo, of course not.
Yeah.
I had to learn about that like later on while I was in the Netherlands. By the way, I am talking about the genocide in Congo.
Leopold and what he did to the people of the Congo.
Okay, if you don't know about that,
Look it
learn about it. And second, Lebanon, which is like there's such a big I feel like if we're talking family dynamic, like Lebanon thinks it's the lost adopted child of France.
Seriously?
Yes.
Whoa.
Like you can literally find Lebanese people who would still willingly want to be under French mandate. It's maybe I'm gonna receive a lot of hate for that, but I mean,
it's the truth.
Yeah, at least it was my experience. And I had internalized some of this. I had internalized the idea that their ways are better than ours. And I honestly, when I came to the Netherlands, these notions started breaking down in front of my eyes, because here I am in one of the most developed Western countries, and people are extremely lonely. And people are struggling to make it on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Whereas Lebanon, a country that is war-torn, people seem to be more okay socially because they have each other.
Yeah.
But it started really showing me how, wait, some of the things that I disregarded about my own culture, some of the practices, some of the ideologies, some of the rituals that have been erased or colonized or re-owned by and resold to us from a Western perspective
Yeah.
are really worth to be looked at by people like us
Yeah.
and to be reclaimed, and finding ways to reintegrate them into our lives.
Yeah.
Most times, for example, if I take the example of belly dance, the more you go south in Africa, it becomes more twerking, but it is about hip movement.
Yeah.
And actually, it's because women store a lot of trauma in their hips. So that's why our dances are about moving the hips so that you're able to release trauma.
Yeah.
Now you have all these ecstatic dances in the West and all these belly dance classes and twerking classes and somatic therapy where it's like, oh, guess what? Like you can release trauma with your body. It's like my ancestors have been doing this.
Exactly. You devalued their knowledge, but it was already there.
Exactly. Or in the case of belly dance, or Oriental dance, I should say, it got overly sexualized.
Yes.
And it's almost like they took it away from us by sexualizing it so much that now if you do belly dance, it's looked at as you are trying to entice men rather than just moving your body as a woman.
But then if a random studio picks it up and rebrands it as somatic therapy, then it's okay.
Yes. And nowadays, actually, it's a big conversation in the Oriental Egyptian dance scene. It is way more acceptable for a white woman, like a Ukrainian or a Russian, to be a belly dancer than it is for people from our own cultures because of how much stigma there is. But if you are Brazilian, you're Russian, you're whatever, you will be more accepted. So,
yeah, I do like that we started with, talking about it in terms of decolonization, because like you said, you come to a country like the Netherlands that is so developed. On its face, everything's good, right? But people are so lonely, they're so isolated, they're so disconnected from each other. I mean, look at the statistics. Countries like the Netherlands, United Kingdom, Australia, and the US have the highest rates of depression. But then you go to a country like Lebanon, or you go to my home country like Nigeria. It's not on its face that great, but there is community. People are connected. The rates of depression are not as high. And it really, I think, speaks to the insidious nature of what gets taken away from you when your culture is stolen, the people are stolen, the meaning gets repurposed to frame a world that isn't natural. Because if you have to create a narrative like that and do so much work to do that, that means you're forcing something that's not real. But here we are, full circle, after centuries of exploitation and devaluation, back to where we started square one. Dance as healing and somatic therapy. It's like, well, people could have told you that 100 years ago. I guess we have to go the longest way possible to learn things that our ancestors already knew. And that, to me, points to truly how we all lose when things like this happen, when cultures and minds are colonized. We all lose. And so, in line with this conversation on decolonization, this disappointment, it's clear, became a catalyst for you for a deeper journey, a journey that at the end of the day you needed to go through. We all need to get to a point where we understand the things that we've internalized and how we've internalized a specific script. I mean, I lived in Senegal, and Senegal, at least when I was younger, was notorious for having a very good relationship with France and having this sort of like French is best mentality as well, that I had to unlearn on many levels from the British, from the French. And what would you say that journey of decolonization has given you in terms of understanding connection? And going back to the conversation on decolonization and the disappointment, you describe your process as reclaiming identity through the body. What did that process actually look like for you practically? I know we were just talking about how our ancestors already knew that this type of dancing was healing and I actually had a function beyond this thing that was overly sexualized. But for you, what was your healing journey through dance, and how did you embark on that even in the first place?
So, one thing that I learned through this process is that the ancestral knowledge is in us. It's never lost, thankfully. And that means that each one of us has the ability to go within and to get access to that knowledge again. And the way that you can do that is through the body. So a lot of that knowledge is in our bodies. It's in our genes. It's in the way that it's in our languages. So it's really coded.
Yeah.
But you have to be intentional about going out there and like picking up the pieces.
Yeah.
And what I would say, if I look at, if I talk about Middle East, Levant communities, what I find really special about them is their relationship to the land and in ritualizing very basic, simple stuff. So, for example, drinking coffee, the women would gather in the morning, drink coffee, and then flip the coffee cup and then do like a bit of a reading about your future in that coffee cup.
Yeah.
Egypt is very much about dance, music, art, expression,
Yeah.
sense of humor, comedy. And Congo is, to me, is maybe the most grounded out of these practices because there's a lot of things that they didn't manage to erase. Like the colorful clothes, the food, the specific flavor combinations. And a lot of my work has been about reintroducing this ritualized way of life into my day-to-day. So from bringing back flavors, learning to cook my grandma's recipes, to being intentional about sharing my culture by inviting friends over and modeling the type of hospitality that I have experienced in my countries, allowing myself to dance and move again, allowing myself to really de-shame also. I remember the first time I put music and I started dancing, I felt like, oh my God, is anyone seeing me right now? Or I would feel self-conscious every time I felt I'm coming across as too sexy. I shouldn't, So there was a lot of talk in my head the first few times.
Yeah.
So it's also about noticing what comes up and reclaiming it, re-owning it, finding a way to stay true to what you think rather than all the messaging you have received from the outside.
I love that. I love that you really point to a piece of mental decolonization that is about shame. I think a really easy way to control people is to make them feel ashamed.
Yeah.
And being able to reclaim something that you were, whether overtly or indirectly, made to feel ashamed of is a huge step. And I think for many of us that are looking to mentally declutter ourselves from stuff that we didn't choose, is it a big first step?
Yeah.
Because a lot of what people talk about when they talk about internalized X, Y, and Z, I believe is just shame. So we just talked about dance, which thank you for that. Egyptian dance, Lebanese food, African dress, each one of these things are more than just aesthetic. As we just mentioned with dancing, they are practical healing reasons for the type of dance that we have. They're a collective memory, movement, and even a form of reclamation in some cases. And how did these practices, more than just dancing, but you mentioned cooking your own food, and you haven't mentioned quite yet about dressing, but we can talk about it a bit more. How did those things reawaken certain parts of you? I know for you, probably at the beginning it was all about going through the motions, and you just mentioned even the first times you were dancing, you noticed things come up. But how have you been able to manage that? What else has come up for you in that time?
I think the biggest part was as an Arab woman who comes from a majority Muslim country as well, one thing I noticed when I came to the Netherlands is how I was perceived as that, and how people here have certain image of what an Arab woman is, and they think that you have suffered in your country and that you came here for freedom. That's the story. And I think before I used to really intentionally try to adopt a persona that kind of fit that, not fit that narrative, but doesn't conflict too much. So it would be like, look, yeah, I'm open-minded. I'm just like you guys. Yes, I can stay at like Friday Boral thing. Fun.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
But then actually going from that to becoming really proud of who I am, and not minding becoming like showing up or presenting as even more Arab. So whether that means dressing up a certain way, putting on jewelry that represents my culture, wearing African pani, so many things. Also, like defending certain opinions that are not popular in the West, standing up for or starting conversations about, for example, colonization that makes the average Dutch person really uncomfortable. Talking about inclusion within a corporate environment, for example. So really, I went from wanting to hide who I really am to kind of stepping really into my identity and being able to show up with a lot of pride in who I am. And that's a completely different energy.
100%.
And that also makes people react to you in a completely different way.
100%.
Yeah.
What were people's initial reactions when you started to feel more comfortable yourself?
I mean, of course, the reaction was varied. I think with anything that is bold, you're gonna find people who are gonna applaud you and people who are gonna be a bit shocked.
Yeah.
For example, I had to navigate very difficult conversation in my mostly Dutch corporate environment. For Eid, for example, I went wearing a abaya, and they did not like that. So we needed to have that conversation.
Oh, wow.
So it was also about understanding that, yeah, if I come to the office wearing henna, it's gonna make certain people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And rather than running away from these conversations, actually having those conversations and really being able to guide people through those conversations. Like, okay, what about this is making you uncomfortable right now? Can we like get to the bottom of it rather than you requiring me to change the way I am presenting for your comfort?
Yeah.
And that's usually a very different conversation or a different approach than like, okay, sure, I will not wear abaya anymore.
Yeah. And it's definitely, from the conversation we were having of you reclaiming your identity and becoming more essentially authentically yourself. Part of that is you don't want to lose that even when you go to work. It's not that you're being offensive, whether you want to be intentionally contrarian, but they're also asking you to curtail a lot of your own identity and to make other people comfortable. So it's like, it's either my comfort or your comfort. And it shouldn't be that way. And I think you speak really beautifully about de-shaming the parts of yourself, and you and your ancestors were taught to hide. Our ancestors were taught to hide. What did that de-shaming feel like emotionally? Because right now we're just talking about how you're having to have these conversations with people and navigate people's discomfort with just you being yourself. What through that process did you not just have to unlearn, but what profound realizations, let's just say, did that give you? Like, because we're talking about this from a very like, well, I did this and this happened, but I want to talk about like your emotional world navigating this.
So first is that the healing or the de-shaming came in layers. And it didn't happen. It wasn't like you draw like in a
like today I am me and it doesn't matter anymore. No.
Exactly. So it was a lot of pain. And like you mentioned, it was ancestral. I had to feel the pain of my mom's family who moved to Congo because their village was not safe anymore in the south of Lebanon. I had to feel the pain of not having the experience of having a village that I can go to every weekend while I was living in Lebanon that my friends had. I had to also experience the pain of not knowing enough my Egyptian side and my grandma growing up away from her kids because of just how their world was set up. So there was a lot of pain that I had to process, a lot of really stuck emotions in my body. And a lot of, so it really felt like, it's like when a baby is starting to crawl and then taking their first step and then walking and then running. That's how it felt, like coming into myself. So it was first with the little things, like, okay, I'm gonna cook this way, I'm gonna dress this way, all the way to just becoming a whole different person who is more stable in who I am. And I have to say that in that journey, the tool that helped me is plant medicine. So a lot of ayahuasca journeys, a lot of mushroom ceremonies, and that was needed in my case because my pain was so huge that I really needed help and support going through it, which I couldn't find in traditional Western therapies. So this is another one of those turning into indigenous tools. And actually, if we go back to all of our ancestors, ancient Egypt, Africa, Levant, every indigenous tribe or people had their medicine that they used to connect to whatever is bigger, whatever is out there.
It's almost like we already had the wisdom, the ancestral wisdom that we seem to we did a giant loop back. I feel this too of you saying like, I'm not just healing my wounds, I'm healing a deep ancestral wound. And I think many of us that choose to embark on this journey, I know you mentioned, for me, I needed this help, I needed plant medicine. I think a lot more of us need to heal that way because it's not just this lifetime worth of pain. And can you imagine the brutality of the experiences of our ancestors, that there's some intervention, some divine intervention that is needed to fully get to a place where I think for many of us, we are the ones healing the lineage.
Yeah.
We're not just healing far back, we're healing forward.
Yeah.
And in order to do so, there needs to be a lot of processing, a lot of work, a lot of healing. And I think it's amazing that you intuitively figure that out.
Yeah.
I think there's something really important right now at this time that we're in, where a lot of people are waking up to this in separate pockets, and they don't understand why they feel called to this level of healing. But I think our ancestors tapped us.
Yeah.
They said,
It's
we couldn't
time.
do it, but it's your turn. Step into the ring. I think it's amazing that we can talk about this. Like, you're from a completely different culture than I am, but it's the same wound. It's the same work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And I think this can apply for everyone that is like waking up to the fact that we have been socialized in a very, very, very strange world.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, really beautiful that we've all many of us have come to this realization independently, but together.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk a bit more about reclaiming and belonging. And, you said that belonging is not assimilation. And I love that. How do you now then define belonging after all these transformations?
Actually, also hearing you recap this, you know what it comes down to? When you meet a person that is different than you, whether it's physically, whether it's the way they think, whether it's whatever it could be, it's to be able to meet that difference with curiosity rather than fear.
Yeah.
And that, if we manage to do that, that would solve already 99% of people's problem.
What do you mean, not live in a fear-based society? How will they control us?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I really feel like something, like these first two humans that were different and that met each other and decided, oh, you are different, therefore you are a threat. That's where it went wrong.
In that exact moment.
Yeah. And then going back from that to a more oneness, which is also, by the way, the message behind ayahuasca. It's also to go back to that oneness. We are all one. We are all just different variation of the same thing, which is to be human. And why is it that if I meet someone that has different hair color, skin color, or eye color than me, all of a sudden I don't know how to talk to this person.
Exactly.
Which is, I think, very much the experience with Dutch people, being afraid of saying the wrong thing or being afraid of offending you. So then they don't really engage in the real conversation and really getting to know you, getting to know your culture. There's not enough curiosity. And I think for me, belonging is any time we belong to each other when we can create this relatability rather than focusing on what separates us. So what is it that we have in common? What is it that makes us not so different from each other? And I think there's so much more beauty that can come out of these types of conversations rather than just focusing on picking whatever is making us different as if that is a bad thing.
I feel like, I remember just being in elementary school and being taught to spot the difference. I think there is a learned thing there for us to always be scanning for how difference is a threat. And I love you talking about curiosity rather than fear. And when you go to a Western world, the Western country like the Netherlands, the society function and runs off of fear. And it really makes you wonder, who does that help? Actually. And I love that you talk about belonging as like, moment to moment, person to person. At the end of the day, we are all skin and bones. All the colors have just been confused. And at the end of the day, and this is something that we we are so lucky to realize, because we've grown up around the world, that people are people. You go to the southernmost part of the world, or the topmost part, people are people.
Yeah.
We have the same needs. We have jokes, we eat food, we, love our families. Like, people are people everywhere, and we do tend to overcomplicate it a bit.
Yes.
When we are trying to, you see this sort of meme of someone that's like trying to fit in with a cultured person or vice versa. It's like, you don't have to do all that. Just be yourself. People will feel that. I think it's an insight. It's a beautiful insight, but it's also an insight that I do recognize we are extremely privileged to have that, to get to see that, because a lot of people don't get to see that most of the world is kind of the same.
Yeah.
And so going into belonging and community, and, I think that that's, at least for me, where I'm at. I spent a lot of time doing the inner work alone. You spent a lot of time doing a lot of work. But the next step is, how do we reintegrate? How do we then find our people? How do we coalesce, around something? And so in this season of your life, what does community mean to you? And especially as someone who's lived in so many worlds, what does a community look like for you?
Yeah. It's really interesting that you say you've done most of the work on your own and now looking for integration. I remember reading somewhere that actual healing only happens through connection, because the hurt or traumas are usually a result of disconnection. So it's actually impossible to heal without being in community. And my first exposure to that was having to do ayahuasca journeys in groups. And that was, in the beginning, it was such a big trigger for me. I was like, why can't I do it on my own? But please. But the practitioner that I work with and that I fully trust was, no, this is a group medicine. This is healing happens in community. Healing, you heal each other. You have to, basically, this is how, as people, we are meant to be there for each other. So from engaging in those or participating in those ceremonies, I've also started integrating more community aspect in my life, meaning that I was thinking about this actually the other day. The difference between having a lot of friends and community is that in a community, everyone knows each other, right? Whereas here, it's like you have a group of friends. So you can turn this group of friends into a community by bringing them together and having them bond also. And so then it creates more of a network rather than like atom-like connections.
Like siloed groups.
Exactly.
Which is really what you find here.
Exactly. So I think in my next phase, I'm also looking on how to turn my group of friends here in the Netherlands into more of a community, but also how to find even more people that I relate to on different ways or that are on a similar journey. And also understanding that community means different things to different people. So also aligning on that. So what does community mean to someone? But what I can definitely see is that there is a level of thirst and need for it.
Yes.
100%.
100%. And I think many of us, and I definitely agree with what you were saying at the beginning of true healing really comes from the community, like going back and integrating. I think there's an element of it that has to be alone, but like that profound healing does happen through community. For me, for a while, and still, a lot of people, I don't think they're not part of communities or that they're desperately seeking community because there are no communities. I think that many people are traumatized by community. Like our understanding of community needs reform. Because when I think of community, I think of having to lose a part of myself. I think about hierarchy. I think about in versus out group. This original us versus them mentality. That I think a lot of people I think that this idea of community needs to reform for a lot of people to also actually be able to heal through community. And I do think that when I hear people saying, well, we're desperately seeking community, it's like not just any community. There needs
Yeah,
to be a bit of a reshuffle there about what community really does mean to us.
exactly.
And how do we make communities safe for people to heal? Not to say that there won't be conflict, not to say that there won't
Yes.
be issues, but how do you create a space for people to be able to actually talk about that? And a lot of that has to do, and this is why I believe that there's an element of healing that does have to start alone, and with, you know, decluttering your own mind, realizing your own biases and things that you are, the shame you are holding. So that when
Yes.
you do go into community, you're not forcing people to play a role that makes your shame center comfortable. So I think we're getting there. I think a lot of people's yearning for community actually may be stemming from a place of, okay, we've been doing the work, we've been healing, we've been seeing the aspects of ourselves that need to grow. Okay, where are all those healed people? Where are all those people that are healing, that are on this journey? You know, and I think that this is why I love this conversation. I love the forum that this podcast is creating, because I want to bring out these people, you know, people like you that are onto something. You know what I mean? But having a meaningful conversation about what that looks like. I think there needs to be a lot of intentionality when we say we're creating community, we're making people feel safe, we're healing people through community. And speaking of community, and speaking of how communities can make us feel small when not intentionally done, many of us struggle with this feeling of being too much or not enough for any one place, and we definitely know that feeling. What advice would you give to anyone who's still searching for home within themselves?
I'm always careful about giving advice because
We are not professionals.
yeah, I also don't like receiving advice. So, but I would say follow your joy. Is follow the things that make you feel happy, good, content, whether it's a scent that you like and that you decide to spread all over your house, whether it's wearing weird makeup and deciding that's your face for the day,
Exactly.
whether it's eating certain food, singing, going to a party, whatever it is, it can be anything. But just follow your joy, because at the end of the day, you will feel at home in your life, wherever you are, when your life is bringing you the satisfaction and the content that you that you desire. And there was a time where I couldn't find my joy, but then a very wise person told me to follow just a better feeling. So that was just relief for me. So whatever would give me relief. And then it went from relief to, oh, I feel okay, like not joyful, but just okay. And then from feeling okay, you can find the next thing that makes you feel a bit more uplifted. And then one day you will find the thing that brings you joy.
I love that, because whenever people say stuff like, you know, do the thing that brings you joy, it's like, okay, what does that tangibly mean?
Yeah.
And I like how you broke that down of, for a lot of people, especially if we're talking about this in terms of a healing journey,
Yeah.
a lot of us come to a healing journey from a kind of broken place. And so really what you're looking for at the beginning is a bit of relief.
Yeah.
To not feel so much
Exactly.
beating yourself up.
And when you're in that place, if someone comes at you and is like, follow your joy, you're gonna be like, what do you mean right now? Like, I don't know what brings me joy. That was definitely my reaction. I came at it with a lot of anger.
Yes.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, taking it to a more like, just find the better feeling, the less resistant thought or action, and do that.
Yeah, I love that. You've called being a misfit a blessing in disguise in our earlier conversations, and in a way a doorway to freedom, because, similar to the advice you just gave, follow your joy, follow what makes you feel relief, what makes you feel good. That may not really connect with the people around you. And for you, as you become more authentically yourself, you've had to have some conversations with people about how you show up. But tell me more about that in terms of freedom? How has that, although it's come with maybe more judgment or a stronger reaction to you than just fitting in and adapting, what has that freedom unlocked for you actually that has made it worth it?
I think the biggest thing is that I feel like I am on my own side. So it's really my freedom means that I can decide for myself what is right for me
Yeah.
and not have outside noise come in between me and myself.
Yeah.
So I get to choose what my identity is. I get to choose how I present that. I get to choose what conversations I want to be having, the places I want to be in. So it's a very empowering position to be in. And from that empowerment, you can really feel free because you're not tied up or put in a box. And it actually gives me so much pleasure when I can see people struggling to put me in a box. You can see the system error happening.
What are you dealing with here?
Exactly. And it's like, oh, did I confuse you? Great.
I'm doing the right thing, actually. I'm being
Exactly.
true to myself.
And I think that being authentically yourself is such a contagious energy.
Yeah.
Then it also spreads. I've seen people who were showing up authentically that inspired me to do the same, and I know the way I'm showing up is probably gonna inspire someone else, and then it creates that domino ripple effect.
Exactly. And I love that something that maybe comes from a place of shame and discomfort can actually be the path towards liberation. When people say stuff like, look, to be cringe is to be free. And it does feel a bit awkward at the beginning. You're like, okay, like I'm going to step more into myself. But just to close up a little bit, or to, as we're getting to the end of the podcast, I just want to ask one last question. If you could speak to the 21-year-old you that moved to the Netherlands, freshly arriving, what would you tell her about belonging and what advice would you give her?
Like, part of me wants to say, like, honey, don't try. Honey, don't
Go
bother. No, in a sense of like, you won't fit in, so just don't try, quit it,
Yeah.
But I also know that what I went through was essential in the only way out was through that disappointment.
Yeah.
So I would say take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Surround yourself with good intentioned people.
Yeah.
Eat well. Dance more.
Yeah.
And enjoy every step of the journey, because it might have felt big back then,
Yeah.
but now in retrospect, it's like, yeah, it was meant to happen.
I love that. And thank you so much, Rana, for coming on the podcast today and for sharing your story and wisdom with so much openness. It was really lovely talking with you. Your journey reminds me and us that belonging isn't something that we seek outside of ourselves. It's something that we return to within. For everyone listening, may we all continue to unlearn the versions of ourselves built for survival and make space for the selves that are built on freedom. You've been listening to Interesting People of Earth. I'm your host, Ani. Until next time.